I never imagined that betrayal could come from both the person you sleep next to every night and the one you grew up sharing secrets with. It wasn't some dramatic discovery. No lipstick on collars, no text messages left open by mistake. Just a feeling, a gut twist that told me something was off. Adam and I had been married for 5 years. To the outside world, we were the picture of happiness. The kind of couple that hosts Sunday brunches, takes silly selfies, and finishes each other's sentences. My sister, Lily, was always around too. She'd visit often, say she missed the family vibe. She even stayed the night on weekends sometimes, said it helped her unwind after her long shifts as a nurse. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Growing up, Lily and I had always been close. I was the older sister by 3 years, the responsible one. She was the pretty, spontaneous one. Boys loved her, teachers let her slide, and our parents. Well, let's just say I was always the reliable daughter, and she was the beloved. I thought we'd grown past those childhood dynamics. I thought marriage and adulthood had matured us both. I was wrong. One evening, Adam came home late from work. It wasn't unusual. He was a manager at a mid-sized tech firm, often stuck in meetings. But this time, his shirt smelled like expensive perfume, and there was an odd tension in his body. I asked if everything was okay, and he kissed my forehead with a tired smile. "Just a long day, babe," he said. Lily was already in the kitchen, humming to herself, making tea. She smiled at me, like nothing was wrong. That was the moment I knew. Something was very, very wrong. I couldn't sleep that night. I laid awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew. I began to notice the little things after that. How Adam laughed a little too hard at Lily's jokes. How she touched his arm in that casual but too familiar way. How they shared inside jokes that I wasn't part of. But I said nothing. Not yet. I smiled. I cooked dinner. I kissed my husband goodnight. I asked Lily if she wanted to join us for brunch. I played the part of the doting wife and the supportive sister, because something told me, if I waited long enough, the truth would reveal itself, and it did. One rainy afternoon, I came home early from a work meeting that had been canceled. I didn't tell anyone I was on my way back. I remember pausing at the door because I heard laughter, intimate, breathy laughter that didn't belong in my living room at 2 p.m. on a weekday. I walked in quietly, and there they were, on our couch, kissing. Lily froze, her lips still wet with my husband's betrayal. Adam stood up fast, stammering, reaching for excuses that sounded like broken glass. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, watching 2 of the people I trusted most look at me like I was the one who didn't belong. "It's not what you think," Adam said, his voice trembling. "No," I whispered. "Then what is it, Adam?" Lily didn't say a word. She just stared, her face pale, guilt smeared all over her like bad makeup. She opened her mouth to speak, but I walked out. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't shout or throw things. I just took my purse, my keys, and left. And that was the last time I was ever the same. I didn't answer any calls that week. Not Adam's, not Lily's, not even my mother's, who, in her usual way, would have likely blamed me for making a scene. I rented a short-term place downtown, small and quiet. A place with no memories. Just white walls and silence, exactly what I needed. The first night I cried. Not because I missed Adam, not even because of Lily. I cried because I had been so stupid, because I'd trusted too easily, because I'd spent years being the one who sacrificed, the one who supported everyone, only to be discarded like I was nothing. On the second night, Adam sent me a text. "Please come home. Let's talk." Home? That house wasn't a home anymore. It was a stage. And I had been the audience of a play I didn't even audition for. Lily's message came 3 days later. I didn't mean to hurt you. It happened. I'm sorry. As if it happened was an explanation. As if falling into my husband's arms was an accident she tripped into like a puddle. I didn't reply. But silence, it turns out, can be louder than any insult. I focused on surviving. I went back to work. I pretended everything was fine. My colleagues didn't ask questions. They noticed the missing wedding ring, the hollow eyes, but said nothing. That quiet sympathy was exactly what I needed. Then, one afternoon, I bumped into Tracy, Adam's boss, at a charity gala I was attending for work. She was elegant, commanding, the kind of woman who didn't raise her voice but could silence a room with a glance. She approached me with a glass of white wine and a knowing look. I heard, she said softly, after a long pause. I'm sorry. I blinked, caught off guard. He told you? She nodded. Adam's a decent worker but not a clever man. And your sister, well, she's not very subtle. I didn't know what to say, so I just stared into my glass. Tracy studied me for a moment. You've handled this well, with grace. I gave a bitter laugh. It doesn't feel graceful. It feels like I'm falling apart in slow motion. She smiled faintly. That's the thing about slow falls. You land on your feet if you're careful enough. We didn't speak more that evening, but that conversation stayed with me. And then, 2 weeks later, Tracy called. She offered me a consulting role at her firm. Not directly under Adam, but close enough. I accepted. I told myself it was just a job, a fresh start. But deep inside, something darker stirred. Not revenge. Not yet, just awareness. A sense of power I hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, Adam kept trying. Texts, emails. He even sent flowers. 12 red roses with a note. 5 years can't just end like this. But they had ended. The moment, I saw him with my sister. Something broke. And once broken, some things don't heal. They harden. 3 weeks after I moved out, Adam showed up at my work. He stood in the lobby with tired eyes and a crumpled expression. The receptionist buzzed, me hesitant. I told her to send him away. But he waited. When I finally walked down, mostly out of curiosity, I found him sitting alone in the cafe across the street. When he saw me, he stood up too fast, nearly knocking over his chair. You look different, he said. I tilted my head. Is that your way of saying I look better without the stress lines? He gave a weak smile. You always looked beautiful. It was strange. Standing in front of the man I had once loved with my whole heart, and feeling absolutely nothing. He tried to talk, apologized, said Lily meant nothing, that it was a mistake, that he missed us. I listened, silently. Every word he said, I watched the way he fidgeted, the way his eyes searched mine for forgiveness. But I gave him nothing. Why her? I asked finally. Of all people. Why Lily? He looked down. I don't know. I was stupid. It was easy. That word again. Easy. You think that's an excuse? I said, my voice low. You betrayed your wife, with her own blood. And the best you can say is, it was easy? He looked like he'd been slapped. I left without saying goodbye. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I stared out the window of my new apartment, lights of the city flickering like tiny truths. And I whispered to myself something I hadn't said in years. You deserve better, and this time, I was going to make sure I got it. People often say success is the best revenge. I used to think that was just something people said to make themselves feel better. But then again, I'd never truly been betrayed. Not like this. The job at Tracy's company wasn't just a job. It was a rebirth. She didn't treat me like a wounded wife or a charity case. She treated me like a woman with potential. And I rose to the challenge. I buried myself in work. Stayed late. Took on projects no one else wanted. In 6 months, I went from the new girl to being invited into meetings where real decisions were made. Tracy watched me closely, not in a judgmental way, but like someone watching a seed they just planted. I knew I had something to prove, not just to Adam or Lily, but to myself, and I was proving it. Meanwhile, Adam's messages slowed. I suppose he finally understood I wasn't coming back. He and Lily had gone public, or so I heard from a mutual friend. I didn't look at their photos. I didn't check their profiles. I didn't care. At least, that's what I told myself. But sometimes, late at night, I'd lie in bed and wonder, were they happy? Did they laugh the same way we used to? Did Lily wear my robe when she stayed over now? Those thoughts used to haunt me. But now, they simply passed through like ghosts that didn't scare me anymore. One afternoon, I walked into the elevator at work, and Tracy was there. She looked at me for a second, then said, "You've changed." I raised a brow. "In a good way?" She smiled, in a powerful way. We stood there in silence for a moment before she added, "We're launching a new division. I want you to lead it." I was stunned. "Me?" "You've earned it," she said, matter of fact. "Besides, I like seeing underestimated women rise." That night, I opened a bottle of wine. Alone. No celebration, no loud cheers, just a quiet toast to the woman I was becoming. The woman who had been shattered, yes, but also the woman who had put herself back together piece by piece, stronger, sharper. And it was around that time that I saw them again. I was walking through a local grocery store, barely paying attention, when I turned a corner and nearly bumped into Lily. She froze. Her eyes widened. She was holding a basket, half full, wearing a tight dress and a forced smile. "Oh," she said, like the word had too many edges. I looked her straight in the eyes. "Lily." Her lips trembled slightly. "You look great." I gave her a slow nod. "I do, don't I?" She blinked. I wanted to reach out, but you didn't," I said calmly. "Because guilt doesn't grow courage, does it?" She looked down at the cereal box in her basket. "I made a mistake." "You made a choice," I corrected. "A conscious one. Repeatedly." She opened her mouth again, but I didn't want to hear it. Whatever excuses she had rehearsed, I'd heard versions of them all before. "I hope you're happy," I said simply. "Because I am." And I walked away. I didn't look back. That night I got a call. It was Adam. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity won. His voice was quieter than usual, uncertain. "I heard you got promoted," he said. "That's amazing." I didn't respond. "I've been thinking about us," he continued. "About everything." Still, I said nothing. Just let the silence stretch. Finally, he said, "Lily's not who I thought she was. And I think about you every day." There it was, the beginning of regret. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I simply said, "You made your bed, Adam." "But I miss you," he said, almost pleading. I smiled, not because I felt joy, but because I finally felt free. "You don't miss me," I said softly. "You miss the version of you that I made better." He fell silent. I ended the call, and that night, for the first time since the betrayal, I slept like I hadn't in years, peacefully. There's something poetic about taking your pain and turning it into precision. After that call from Adam, I knew one thing for sure. He wasn't sorry because he loved me. He was sorry because he was losing me. And losing me meant losing a version of his life that made him feel like a man worth something. But that man was gone now. And I was just getting started. At the company, the new division I led began gaining attention. We were small at first, just 5 people, but hungry, focused. Tracy gave me full control, and I treated it like building my own empire. Every presentation, every deal, every late night, it was fuel, not rage, not revenge, focus. And then, Tracy called me into her office again. "Have you ever considered taking on a senior partner role?" she asked. My heart skipped. "I haven't," I admitted, still trying to catch my breath. "You should," she replied, leaning back in her chair. "You've outgrown your current level, and we're expanding again. You're exactly the kind of leader we need." I swallowed my shock, keeping my expression measured. I'd be honored. Tracy smiled. "Good. We'll make it official soon." I walked out of her office feeling like something had shifted, not just professionally, but cosmically. For the first time in my life, I didn't just feel successful. I felt powerful, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do next. A week later, I made a quiet inquiry to HR. It wasn't unusual for managers to request internal team assessments. I wasn't being invasive. I was being strategic. I asked for the performance records of every department head across our branches. I wanted to see what we had, what could be optimized, what needed change. And there he was, Adam, still clinging to middle management. Still in the same office, no promotion since I left. His recent reviews? Spotty, lacking leadership, disengaged. And just like that, an idea began to form. Not out of vengeance, but because it was necessary. The expansion Tracy had mentioned, it involved restructuring. Some managers would be let go, others moved, some departments absorbed. It was the perfect opportunity. I drafted a transition plan, clean, logical, no personal bias. On paper, it looked like a typical reorganization, for efficiency. But at its center was one undeniable conclusion. Adam's position was obsolete. I submitted it to Tracy with notes and justifications. She called me in the next day. "You're suggesting we dissolve Adam's department?" she asked, skimming the proposal. "Yes," I said. "Their KPIs have been consistently under target. They're inefficient. Their overhead isn't justifiable, given our new model." She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled slightly. Cold. I didn't flinch. Strategic. Tracy nodded. "I like it." That was it. No dramatics, no confetti. Just a signature, an agreement, and a quiet green light to proceed. 2 weeks later, Adam was called in for a meeting with HR. I wasn't in the room. I didn't need to be. But I was told he took it poorly. He asked questions, tried to argue, demanded to know who made the decision. He never got an answer, and I never gave him one. That night, I received a message from Lily. "Why did Adam get fired? Was this you?" I stared at the text, fingers hovering over the screen. Then I wrote back. He wasn't fired. His position was eliminated. That's how restructuring works. She didn't reply. But I knew she knew. A few days later, I ran into Tracy in the hallway. She gave me a knowing look. "You know, I've been in business a long time," she said. "I've seen all kinds of leaders, but the ones who rise the fastest are usually running from something." I met her eyes. "Maybe, but I'm not running anymore." She smiled. "No, now you're steering." That evening, As I left the office, the autumn wind caught my coat. I paused at the sidewalk, watching people rush by, lives unfolding in every direction. And I realized I didn't feel angry anymore, not even toward Adam or Lily. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had freed me. If they hadn't broken me, I never would have rebuilt myself. And now, I was standing taller than ever. I didn't expect to see Adam again so soon, but life, in its twisted poetry, has a way of bringing unfinished chapters back into focus, just long enough for you to write the ending you deserve. It was a Friday. We were hosting a cross-departmental networking event, formal enough for suits, casual enough for champagne. I'd been asked to give a short speech about leadership, growth, and change. Ironically fitting. As I moved through the crowd greeting people, I caught sight of someone near the entrance. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. It was Adam. He wasn't supposed to be here. He didn't work here anymore. But someone must have invited him out of habit. Or maybe it was a mistake. Or maybe it wasn't. He looked older, not in years, but in posture, like someone who had spent the past few months walking uphill into the wind. When our eyes met, I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I didn't even blink. He approached cautiously, like a man approaching a cliff he might fall from again. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. I glanced around, then motioned toward a quieter hallway. He followed. For a moment, we just stood there, the muffled sounds of music and laughter behind us. "You did this," he finally said. "Didn't you?" "Did what?" I asked, calm as glass. "My job. The restructuring. That was you." I tilted my head slightly. "Are you saying you weren't meeting performance expectations?" He stared at me, searching for the woman he used to know, but she was gone, and in her place stood someone far more composed. "You used to be kind," he muttered. "I still am," I replied. "But I've also learned that kindness doesn't mean letting people walk over you twice." Exhaled, hands in his pockets like he didn't know what to do with them. "I made mistakes." "You made choices," I corrected, just like I had with Lily. "And now you're living with the outcomes. So am I. The only difference is, I built something from the rubble. You're still sifting through ashes." He swallowed hard, eyes glassy. "I miss you." I looked at him for a long moment. Then, with the softest tone I could manage, I said, "You miss who you were when you were with me. That's not the same thing." And with that, I walked away. Back into the party. Back into the life he no longer belonged to. Later that evening, I was pulled aside by Tracy. "I heard Adam showed up," she said, eyebrow raised. "He did." "And?" I smiled faintly. "Let's just say he finally realized I don't belong in his world anymore." Tracy gave a short nod. "Good. You deserve better company." Then she added something that stayed with me. "Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and the world listens anyway." The following week, I received an invitation to speak at a women's leadership conference. It was unexpected, but not undeserved. My name had begun to carry weight, partially because of the work I'd done, and partially because people whispered, my story like a modern myth, the betrayed wife who rose higher than anyone expected. I accepted. The night before the event, I got a message from Lily. "I'm sorry for everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted to say it." There was no excuse, no justification. Just those 2 short sentences. For the first time in months, I didn't feel anger when I read her words. Just distance. I didn't reply. Because some chapters aren't meant to be reopened. They're just meant to be learned from. At the conference, I stood in front of a room full of women, CEOs, entrepreneurs, survivors, dreamers, and for the first time, I told my story publicly. I didn't name names. I didn't get dramatic. I simply told the truth, that I had been betrayed, that I had been broken, but that breaking wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The room was quiet when I finished. Then the applause came. Not thunderous, not explosive, just long and steady, like they understood, like they saw me. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 25, eyes wide and voice trembling. "How did you do it?" She asked. "How did you not let them destroy you?" I smiled softly. They did, in a way. But I chose what to build with the ruins. She nodded slowly, and I saw something shift in her eyes. Something fierce, something determined. That night, I went home alone. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt whole. 2 months passed. Things quieted down after the conference. The whispers faded, and in their place came something steadier: respect. Real, earned respect. I was promoted again, this time to executive partner, the youngest in the company's history. My team had grown, revenue had soared, and I was now overseeing multiple branches, including the one where Adam used to work. And that was when the final piece of the puzzle slid into place. It started with an email from Tracy. "Want to join? Me for a dinner with the board next week? Just a few key people. We'll be discussing the next round of leadership shifts." I agreed, not thinking much of it. These dinners happened often, and I had attended several already. But when the reservation came through, my heart stilled for half a second. The restaurant was Eloise, the most exclusive fine dining establishment in the city, the kind of place people waited 3 months to get into. Why that restaurant? Because I knew something Adam didn't. Lily worked there, as a hostess. I had discovered it months earlier, completely by accident. A friend had taken me to Eloise for lunch, and there Lily was, wearing black, her hair in a tight bun, face tight, with a polite smile she clearly didn't mean. She hadn't seen me then. But I'd seen her, and now, it was time. The night of the dinner, I arrived early. Tracy was already seated, sipping red wine like she owned the universe. In a way, she did. We exchanged a few pleasantries before the rest of the group arrived. 2 board members, the CFO, and a senior partner from the LA office. It was all business at first. Discussions about expansion, long-term growth, candidate evaluations, and then Tracy said something that changed everything. "I'm recommending you to oversee the National Integration Project," she said, glancing at me. "It would put you above all regional directors." I blinked. "That would include all of them," she said, her tone knowing. "Even if certain ones try to come back." I caught the subtle nod. She wasn't just thinking about me as a rising leader anymore. She was signaling, "You've arrived. This is your domain now." And then the door opened. I turned slightly, and there she was. Lily. Her eyes locked onto mine the moment she stepped into the dining area. She froze, just for a second, then straightened. Professional. Distant. But I saw the tremble in her fingers as she approached our table. "Good evening," she said softly. "Welcome to Eloise. I'll be..." She couldn't finish. Her voice cracked, just barely. Tracy looked up. "Do you know her?" she asked me casually. I sipped my wine. "Yes," I said. "That's my sister." Lily stiffened. There was a beat of silence before Tracy nodded, completely unfazed. "Interesting." Lily swallowed. Would you prefer another server?" I smiled politely. No, I think you'll do just fine. And so she stayed. She poured wine. She took orders. She stood there while I discussed quarterly numbers and profit margins with people who now hung on my every word. She listened as Tracy praised my strategic vision, my resilience, my precision. And every now and then, I glanced up, just to catch her watching me. Just to see that flicker of something in her eyes. Not guilt. Regret. Because in that moment, she finally saw me for what I'd become. Not the woman who had been betrayed, but the woman who had transcended it. After dinner, as we stood outside saying our goodbyes, Tracy turned to me and said, "She looked like she's aged." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I'm guessing she didn't know you'd be sitting at that table tonight. No, I replied. But she needed to. Tracy smiled. Well played. And then she added, "Next month, I want you to come with me to DC. We're speaking at the Women in Leadership Summit." "Both of us?" I asked, surprised. "No," she said. "You're the keynote. I'll be your opening act." Later that night, as I walked home through the soft, glowing streets of the city, my phone buzzed. A message. From Adam. "Saw a picture of you at Eloise tonight. You looked powerful." That was all it said. I stared at the screen, then locked my phone and slipped it into my bag. I didn't reply. Some endings don't need a closing line. They speak for themselves. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply move on. Not out of bitterness, not out of spite, but because you no longer owe your pain a home. After that night at Eloise, something inside me shifted. It wasn't triumph, not exactly. It was more like release. The weight I'd been carrying for over a year, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the silent anger, had finally slipped off my shoulders. And I could breathe again. Not because Lily had suffered, not because Adam had crumbled, but because I had risen. The days after were quiet. No more messages, no more run-ins, no more ghosts from a life I no longer belonged to. At work, I threw myself into the National Expansion Project. I was on flights every week, meeting new teams, solving problems, mentoring younger women who reminded me of a version of myself I no longer mourned. I had become someone new, someone whole. One Sunday morning, I was having coffee at a small bookstore, cafe I'd come to love. It was quiet, warm, filled with the smell of paper and old wood. I sat by the window, flipping through pages, enjoying the stillness. A woman approached me. She looked to be in her early 30s, nerves fluttering at the edge of her smile. "Excuse me," she said softly. "You probably don't remember me, but I was at the leadership conference a few months ago." "You spoke." I closed my book and smiled. "I remember your face." Her eyes lit up. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "I was in a really dark place back then. My partner had left, my family blamed me, and I thought I was broken. But your story, it reminded me that I didn't have to stay broken." My throat tightened. "You didn't," I said gently. "I didn't," she echoed, nodding. "I started my own business. It's small, but it's mine, and I'm happy. Not healed completely, maybe, but happy." I reached across the table and touched her hand. "That's more than enough." She left shortly after, and I watched her disappear into the street, her stride confident, purposeful. That moment stayed with me all day, because that was when I realized this was my closure. Not the public success, not the looks of regret in Lily's eyes, or the silence in Adam's messages, but this, the ripple effect. The healing passed from one woman to another like a quiet torch. A few weeks later, I got a call from my mother. We hadn't spoken much since the divorce. She had always been closer to Lily, though she'd never admitted it. Outright, her voice on the phone was tight, awkward. "I saw the article about you," she said, "in Forbes." I waited. "You've done well. Thank you." There was a long pause before she added, "Lily's not doing great." I said nothing. "She misses you." My mother tried again. "She knows she was wrong." Another pause. "Do you think you'll ever talk to her again?" I closed my eyes for a moment. "I don't hate her," I said finally, "but some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt." My mother sighed. "You always were the strong one." I didn't correct her. I didn't say no, I became the strong one. She wouldn't have understood the difference. After we hung up, I stood by the window of my apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and fire, and I realized I was no longer waiting for apologies, no longer carrying the need to prove anything, no longer holding on to people who had let me go. Months passed, then a year, then 2. I met someone eventually. Not someone who saved me, but someone who met me exactly where I already was. Whole, steady, enough. We didn't rush. We didn't need to. And when we stood together years later, in front of family and friends, promising to build something honest this time, I didn't think of Adam or Lily. I thought of the woman who walked out of a house one rainy afternoon, with nothing but a purse and her pride, and I smiled. So here's what I'll say to anyone who's still standing in the ruins. You may not see it now. You may feel like you've been reduced to dust. But trust me when I say, ashes can be fertile ground. And when you rebuild, don't just become who you were. Become someone they'll never forget.